Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the Truex lecture. I would like again to thank Kit Mayer. I see her sitting over here. Kit is the class of 1977 and the niece of Everett P. Truex, who was the class of 1942. And it's through the generosity of Everett Truex. Thank you, Kit, for standing. Yes, now I can see you. William Jewell has established this annual forum to assemble top thinkers in a conversation about economic and financial issues in our day. So everyone, join me in a round of applause to thank Kit. And our speaker tonight is going to actually be introduced by another illustrious guest that we have with us this evening. Chris Dathos, class of 2014, was a business administration major with an emphasis in entrepreneurial leadership. He was active in Lambda Chi, served as a cardinal host, sang in the concert choir. After graduating, he was hired by the Kansas City Chiefs as a partnership activation coordinator, and he was recently promoted to manager of business development in the Chiefs Partnership Development Team. Please welcome Jewell alum and the newest Department of Business and Leadership Hall of Fame inductee as of about 15 minutes ago, Chris Dathos, as he introduces our guest speaker for the Everett P. Truex Economic and Financial Forum. Chris.
It's my honor to introduce our speaker tonight, Lamar Hunt Jr. Lamar Hunt Jr. is the founder of two Kansas City-based companies, Loretto Companies, LLC, a real estate development company, and Loretto Foundation, LLC, a private charitable organization. He is a member of the founding family of the Kansas City Chiefs and owner of the Kansas City Mavericks, a franchise member of the Premier AA Professional Hockey League in the United States and Canada. Lamar serves on the board of directors of Hunt Midwest Enterprises, a Kansas City real estate development company, and Bright Futures Fund, which helps children attend inner-city Catholic schools. Lamar and his wife Rita won the 2017 Elizabeth Ann Seton Award presented by the National Catholic Education Association to individuals whose support impacts Catholic education and the well-being of our nation's youth. Lamar graduated from the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music with a bachelor's degree in music and later completed a master's degree in counseling at Dallas Baptist University. Two of his passions in life are the beauty of classical music and the promotion of healthy family relationships. Please help me in joining our speaker, Lamar Hunt Jr. and Dr. Elizabeth McLeod-Walls.
You hear okay? Can you hear me all right?
Can you hear me?
Let's see, I saw this guy. Game 7. Who's going to win? All right. Should I bring this up just a little bit higher?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, great.
So, snow and Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah.
All right.
That seems about right. We are absolutely delighted and honored to be in conversation with you tonight, Lamar, to learn from you tonight. So thank you for taking the time to visit with our students and our Jewell community. I want to assure you that usually October 30th on the Hill is a glorious day, but the weather gods were not nice to us today. So we're very glad that you all made it out tonight to hear Lamar Hunt Jr. Share his story. So I want to start with what we here at Jewell think are the two biggest influences in your life, which would be your dad and also the time that you spent on our campus when you were young and the Chiefs were playing here at William Jewell College. And would love to hear about your reflections from that time in your life.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I remember now we talked about this.
Just a little bit.
Okay. So after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl after the 1969 season, that was Super Bowl IV, for those of us that can remember, and wish we'd get another one in there. And so my dad, we drive up here from Dallas, and he drops me off at a dorm. I want to say it was Mathis. Is that still, has that been here that long?
Yes, Mathis is our oldest dorm.
Okay, that's it. See, I saw it today, and it just sent chills up my spine. And so he drops me off, and he says, look, you need to go in there. You're going to be here for about a month. And you need to go find Bobby Yarborough, the equipment guy, and he'll tell you what to do, and he'll give you a dorm room and you're just going to be here and work. I mean, I knew about this. I mean, he told me it. But then, you know, you drop you off and you walk in with your stuff. It's like, this isn't summer camp for me. And so for the next month I was here, and I did this 2 summers where basically you just schlepped all the dirty laundry, cleaned all the floors and everything. But it was one of the great experiences of my life. And as my sons got older, I wanted them to have the experience, but the labor laws had changed, and they had to be 18 to work at training camp and things like that. So it didn't work out quite the same way. By then they were not interested, for sure. But it was a great experience to really kind of learn about hard work. Obviously, you know, our family has been involved with the team since 1960, so I was, you know, 3 years old when it was formed. And so it's always been a part of our life, always been a part of my life. So to have that experience was pretty special, and to spend those times here. And it was really kind of introduction 101 to hard work, to really what hard work was. But you didn't question it, you just did it. And it was great. I mean, I don't remember, you know, we didn't have TVs or cell phones or video games. We worked. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the players had struck. Now, maybe not that season, but the next one. And at one point, to get practices in, they had to do 3 a days. So we were working around the clock to get the laundry ready and pick up the tape and just all the stinky stuff that you do in the locker room. So that's the first thing. The other thing is I thought I would open tonight with a concept that I think is going to be pertinent for this room. And it sort of is sharing a memory about my dad and sort of telling you a little bit about him before we get into some of the prepared questions that many of you submitted. So my dad was born into a very, very wealthy family. He's the youngest of 7 children. And in fact, he was born in 1932. And in 1950, my grandfather, H.L. Hunt, was on the cover of Time magazine, standing on a street corner in Manhattan, New York, with the caption, "Is this the richest man in the world?" So this is the family my dad is born into. So he's 18 years old. He's been away at boarding school for 5 years, from 8th grade through 12th grade up in Pennsylvania. He comes back and he goes to SMU. He plays football at SMU. He sits on the bench at SMU because he plays behind Raymond Berry, a future Hall of Fame receiver for the Baltimore Colts. But he never really got to play. He also played with Forrest Gregg, who's a Super Bowl coach, and played in a Super Bowl for the Green Bay Packers. Anyway, so my dad does what you'd think you would do in any business like this. We're in the oil and gas business. It's a very well-to-do family. We have a company called Hunt Oil Company. We've got oil and gas interests all over the world, Pakistan, North Africa. He gets a degree in geology. And in my dad's case, it was a 5-year degree, which was, I was always glad to hear that, you know, that it took him 5 years. But anyway, part of it was he was traveling and doing some what we'd call internships today. So he gets the degree and he starts working in the oil and gas business, and he gets to go to exotic places like North Africa, and Pakistan and places like that. I remember him telling us a little bit about that as we got older. And he doesn't like it. It's not fulfilling. What's fulfilling is he wants to own a professional football team, which is sort of an interesting desire. But one of his heroes, Doak Walker, Bobby Lane, they played for the Detroit Lions. He went to the Detroit Lions training camp in the mid to late 1950s, maybe right around the time I was born. And one of his friends recalls my dad said, "Wouldn't it be cool to own a professional football team?" And his friend, who is still alive today, looked at him and goes, "Wow, what are you thinking, dude?" You know. So in 1958, my dad began a methodical, after working 3 years in the oil and gas and sort of being dissatisfied with it, he began a methodical search to try to get a pro football franchise in Dallas. And he started meeting with the most obvious candidate would be to buy an existing franchise in the National Football League, which was the Chicago Cardinals. A lot of people don't realize this. The Cardinals have been owned by the Bidwell family since 1932. So today they're the Phoenix, Arizona Cardinals, and but this was the Chicago Cardinals. They were in Chicago, and they were sort of like the poor, what you would call the poor stepchild to the Chicago Bears. Anyway, my dad met with the Bidwell family on numerous occasions, learned the names of a lot of people, made a lot of contacts. My dad was pretty good at doing all that sort of stuff. And finally, they told him no. we're not going to do that. So he gets on a flight. He's meeting with this family down in Florida. He gets on a flight coming from Miami back to Dallas. He gets some stationery, which was something he used to do, from the American Airlines stewardess, the hostess, gets a pen and writes out a business plan for the professional football league called the American Football League. And that is still it's displayed in Canton, Ohio. So his idea was, look, we need to start a league, and here's why. We can go into markets where there are not teams like San Diego, like Dallas, different places like that. But we also need teams in Los Angeles and in New York. Those were the big two markets. So he begins that process of finding other owners, potential owners, putting a business plan together. And suddenly the NFL begins to realize that these 8 men, in this case, eight individuals, if you will, meant business. They were very wealthy families. Baron Hilton was one of these individuals. He just passed away, I believe, at the age of 91. He owned the San Diego team, I believe, from 1960 to 1968, but he just passed recently, et cetera. So this history is sort of still going in a sense. Anyway, he forms the league, and of course it's war at that point. And the NFL feels very threatened, somewhat insecure, and they poach the Minnesota Vikings, the team we're playing this week. People don't realize the Minnesota Vikings were that 8th franchise in the American Football League. They poach them. So they come to my dad, and this is kind of the teaching moment, one of the teaching moments that I want to convey to you. And they say, look, we'll take 3 of your teams, besides we've taken the Vikings. The other 4, you got to let them go. And my dad says, in a moment of incredible, I think, loyalty and insight, he says, no, we'll find an 8th team and we're going to play. Because you need 8 teams to play an equal schedule, right? You can't have idle teams every week. And that team was the Oakland Raiders. So that's how we got them. But it was the first lesson is that he developed this plan. He understood the business. He had the model. He'd been sort of like when a general comes to the front, he'd been studying it for a couple of years, studying the game plan, the attack, the way I'm going to do this, thought it through, and in 1960 they started playing. So that's the first lesson, is this incredible loyalty that my dad had, and it was a lifelong trait, and I think it was a pretty cool trait to have. The other thing I would have you think about, because everybody here is he was 25 years old when he got this idea, in a sense, to start this league. He didn't really get it fully executed till he was 28, but I mean that's pretty bold and brash if you think about it. Very entrepreneurial. My dad was very entrepreneurial. But the thing that he was striving for is a term that I heard about a decade ago. That's sort of I'm going to call it an unconscious process in all of us, is this idea of earned success. That no matter what your degree program is, no matter where you're going with your life at this point, you want to earn the success. Now, you don't want to earn the success to be the center of attention. Earned success, as defined by this concept, means I want to add value, meaning, and purpose to other people's lives. And that is what my dad did with starting the American Football League. And I'll give you one example, and then we get into the questions. In 1962, the team was in Dallas. There's a picture at the stadium in the suite where we watch the games called the Founders Suite. And it's of the 1962 Dallas Texans starting offensive lineup and starting defensive lineup. In the offensive lineup, there's one African-American, Abner Haynes. The rest are all white guys. In the defensive starting lineup, there is one defensive player, Dave Grayson. The rest are all white guys. In 1962, my dad made a decision to put on the promotional material for the Dallas Texans, in Dallas, Texas, Abner Haynes, for all the promotional material. Another act of courage in light of that. And you may have, you can read about my dad and others, how important the AFL was for sort of breaking through that prejudice, that deep inset prejudice that was part of our country's history, that gets talked about a lot in a lot of different ways. But he did something about it, And there was a coach the other night at the Chiefs game, Emmett Thomas, who's 76 years old. He just coached for us as recently as a year ago. He's retired. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He told me, my dad came to his campus, which I think was Bishop College in Dallas, Texas, which doesn't exist anymore, and personally recruited him to play in the NFL. Emmett Thomas became a Pro Bowler, a Hall of Famer, a great coach. He was actually a defensive coordinator when he got as high as he did in coaching, and he'd been with the defensive backs of the Chiefs for maybe the last decade. So those words, loyalty, earned success, and I'll leave you the last one, courage, are things that you hear these words, but you're going to get those chances to deal with them in your own life. And know that what's in your heart, because the distance from your head to your heart is not very far, about 18 inches, is that earned success is what you want. You want success, yes, but you want that to be able to add value and meaning to other people's lives. That's what you're striving for, whether you know that or not. Alrighty.
I hear you describing a lot of aspects of one's character. So in order to be successful, you have these certain characteristics, whether it's courage, earned success. And we had the privilege at our table tonight of hearing Mr. Hunt talk to one of our students about other elements of one's character, one's integrity that lead to success. And I was wondering if you would share a little bit of that with the larger audience tonight.
Is it Lexi?
It's Lexi.
She's got it on our phone.
Yeah.
So, I got to pull my cheat sheet out.
That's fine.
So, there are four things to sort of think about as you unfold in your life, and it really comes from Shakespeare. The first part of it is know thyself. Some people attribute it to the Greek philosophers as well. Sort of knowing yourself, sort of understanding yourself, sort of understanding your wiring, your gifts, and things like that. Not everybody's wired the same way, right? We're not robots. But the very first thing would be able to ask yourself, how and where am I going to plug in life? And that could be something like you become an expert at something. Doctors are, for example, an example of that. I have a son who's going to be a PhD in data science here, and he's also worked for Novartis, and he's worked for KU, actually, and he's going to have he has a lot of expertise as a data scientist, okay? The other thing is your identity. Your identity is extremely important. Stewardship, passive investing, things like that. But sometimes you have an emotional connection. I would say in the Hunt family, we all have an emotional connection to the Chiefs. We all have different roles, different things that we do on behalf of the organization. Obviously, my brother Clark is the CEO. He's I'll call him the point guard. His cell phone is the one who lights up all the time, I'm sure. But we all have that. So the very first thing is, how am I plugging into things? Some of you may, for example, come from a family where there is a family business already existing. I met somebody the other day who resisted and resisted for years the call of his father, and finally he was an attorney, and his father said, just come work for me for 6 months. And now it's 23 years later, and he loves the work he's doing, and his father is retired, and he's running the company. So you have those decisions that we all have. So how I plug in is number one. Number two, what's your attitude? Gratitude versus ingratitude, and we talked a little bit about that. Sometimes ingratitude can come about because we're angry. We're angry at something somebody did to us. We have this idea of victimhood in our country right now a little bit. Material inequality. These are things you have to deal with and understand. Sometimes people are just passive aggressive. They'll just go along to get along, and you never really know what they think or what they're doing. Sometimes we're angry. Sometimes there's a sense of entitlement. I think in our family, that's something that my parents did a pretty good job of keeping us away from that sense of entitlement. It doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It doesn't mean it doesn't creep into our lives, but it does at times. Sometimes spoiled is another word. But looking at your attitude, looking at being grateful for the things in your life right now. I know people that get in the habit of every day of sort of mentally just, what am I thankful for today? Really changes your mindset. As human beings, we sort of have a bias to look at the negative, to look at the glass half empty. We really do. We can be very, very critical. And I think you see that if you just glimpse at any of the news, especially with it around political commentary and things like that. It's very, very critical, demeaning, personal attacks, things like that. But looking at your own attitude. The next part, that's number three, is how do I learn? And I could go in more length of this, but people learn, some people, I'm talking to this gentleman here, he's going to listen. He's going to be an active listener, he said here. But some people, though, learn by reading. That's how I learn. I read a lot. That's kind of my hobby still. Some people learn by just listening. Very careful listeners, and they can take away what they need. Others learn by writing. In other words, how can you be a good writer unless you practice writing? In fact, I would encourage all of you to practice writing. We were talking about this at dinner. One of the things that I see that people struggle with in their communication, especially younger people, is the ability to put together a coherent paragraph. And in this day and age, for people to send things with misspellings, oh my gosh. But writing is something you need to practice. Journaling is not a bad idea. It really isn't. Reflecting on your experiences. Speaking is another one. I've been asked to do more speaking than I ever thought I would. But now I'm grateful, although I cursed him at the time, to my speech teacher in high school, George Edwards. You see, I can remember his name. But he made us stand up and speak. And boy, is it unnerving, when you're younger, if you don't like it. But how do I learn? Because sometimes, we were talking again with Lexi, sometimes lawyers, they learn a lot by just speaking. That's what they do. They speak a lot, right? And sometimes they're thinking out loud. That's a way of learning. Okay. The last thing is your temperament, knowing how you're wired. And this is extremely important. And again, I can email this and you can disseminate it, but it comes sort of out of Greek philosophy. There's sanguine, choleric, melancholy, and phlegmatic. Now, those may be big fancy words, but mainly those are people. Like sanguine people are very relational oriented. I have some of that in me. I'm a relationally oriented person. Choleric are people that are ambitious. They're doers. They're going to get things done. I use the example of President Trump. Like him or not, he is a choleric, doer type personality, right? That's what he does. That's his wiring. Maybe his style is something we'd all like to coach him on. Melancholy people are thinkers. They're more introverted. They're thoughtful. Sometimes composers are like this. Beethoven was very melancholy. He composed by compiling a lot of fragments of stuff, and then he would just spew it out. He also had a choleric streak in him as well. The last one is phlegmatic. These are people who are watchers. They're more relaxed. They're willing to kind of sit back, not in a passive-aggressive way, but in an active sort of way of taking things in, contemplating, and then they will go act upon that information. But knowing your temperament, usually you have a unique temperament. So if you're not, for example, sometimes sanguine people are very good salespeople. They can keep a lot of balls in the air, and they're off to this sales, and they can track their... I was talking to a young man last night. My wife and I do some premarital preparation work for couples, and he has 120 accounts with locked-in insurance, and I said, how do you manage that? And he goes, I just do it. It was just his wire. He was wired to do it. It's sort of interesting. He was very methodical in how he expressed himself, but he has all these balls in the air and all these renewals that he needs to get. The pressure is on, right? Here he is having to come prepare for his marriage, and he's thinking about, I got to get these 120 accounts done by 1/1/20. So I can send this to you, or Lexi can send it to everybody. Actually, she can send it to everybody. See, you got to learn to delegate.
That's right.
All right, enough of that. And there's a test afterwards, so you got to memorize it all.
Active listening. I love this question because our students are just beginning their journey. And so if you think about the beginning of your journey, if you could go back to this time in your life, what would you do the same and what would you do differently and why?
I don't want to use the word regrets, right? But I think I had a really strong interest in being a doctor at one time. And it's maybe why I got the counseling degree later in life. And I think that I can even remember a conversation when my mom bought me a microscope in 10th grade for my own home use. I just couldn't stand to be, maybe I was a little spoiled and entitled or something here. I couldn't just stand what was going on in the classroom. I had to have, but she said, you need to promise me you'll be a doctor. And I said, got it, I'll do it. But I was also very interested in music. So when I think back, I think I might look back and say, well, that's the path that I might have taken, would be to be a doctor. That's one thing. As far as let's kind of restate the question.
Sure. What would you do the same? What would you do differently if you were sitting in these seats today?
Okay. I think that probably I should have listened to my parents more too, as a source of wisdom. I'm going to use wisdom, not advice. Because when I think back about some of the things they said, they were true. And everybody's heard the phrase that Mark Twain said, in my early 20s, I thought my parents were dumb, and by the time I was 30, I was amazed at how much they knew or how much they'd learned. But meaning they had wisdom, and I think if I look back, there were things that were said to me that just didn't take root or take to soil, if you will, until I was a little older, and there were some lessons learned from it. So your parents are sources of wisdom. Don't text them, call them and tell them how thankful you are for being able to be at a school like this, or just in the path that you are in life. For sure, really. It means a lot. We have a lot of kids, and it means so much more to me when they just call. My daughter, one of the daughters who lives out in Bend, Oregon, called me tonight, and I texted her back, and I said, what do you need? I'm getting ready to go speak. And she goes, I just wanted to catch up with you. Ooh, awesome.
Well, as the mother of 16 and 14-year-old boys, you're giving me a lot of hope. Because right now I can't do anything right. So I'm going to wait for the day that they pick up the phone and call me and tell me that I'm wise. You talked also at dinner about how you interview and what you look for. And I was curious about how that builds a particular culture in your organizations.
Well, again, I've been able to participate in interviews. I've been fortunate enough to participate in interviews for head coaches, all the way down to people that are just, day-to-day regular folks who are really run the organizations in a lot of ways. And I think one of the things I've learned to ask people is tell me about a time you failed. And just sort of watch the reaction, because some people don't want to own failure. They want to push away from it, and it sort of floods their mind. And I recounted a story of a young man that I sat through his interview just recently, and we asked him about a time he had failed. And he sat there and he thought very quickly, and he said, well, I did this, and I did this, and I really didn't need to do it. And it failed. It was a Twitter type approach to an event. And since we were hiring him to sell sponsorships and things like that for a minor hockey team, it was a pretty important answer. It really was. It was a very good answer.
What one thing in your budget would you never cut?
Well, people. People are your greatest asset. They really are. And for those of us at dinner tonight, there's a test. So the CEO of Schwab, Walter Bettinger, was 22 years old. He was in his senior year of college, back east, finance, banking. You don't become the CEO of Schwab without getting started on that course. He walks into the classroom for the final exam, and the teacher says, look, you guys all know the stuff. It's great, awesome. I have no doubt all of you will be successful. There's a blank sheet of paper in front of you. I need the answer to just simply one question. What's the name of the lady who cleans this building? Nobody could answer it. And he said, I'd walked by her for 4 years. Her name was Dottie, by the way. So my question is, there was a young African-American server at our dinner. Does anybody know his name?
I do.
Ryan, bingo. Were you at that dinner? Were you at the dinner? You knew it too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Okay. So his point is that there are people that are really doing real work, and we need to pay attention to those people. And you cannot believe how important it is to ask people their name and connect with them in that moment. Put down our phones and start. Did I catch you on the phone over there?
I believe her.
Yeah, she's probably 100. You get an A. But you can't believe how important it is to connect with people who are doing real jobs and really hard work. We can't imagine how wonderful it is to just sit here and really be served by others, in a sense. It's amazing. It really is. Walter Bettinger, he does another thing at job interviews. He takes them out to breakfast. If you're ever caught in this position, he tells the waiter or waitress, mess up the order for them, and then he sees how they react. So if you're ever out with me and your order's messed up,
It's a test.
he wants to see how they react.
Yeah.
Meaning courteously,
Sure.
etc. Some people are not so courteous.
So we are known as the Critical Thinking College, and we talked a little bit about this also at dinner, and I'm hearing you thread this through your answers as well, the importance of being able to write effectively and communicate effectively. But we believe that critical thinking within this nurturing learning environment leads to meaningful lives of purpose. And I'm curious to know, in your own experience, in your own businesses, how have you seen, or in your personal life, how have you seen critical thinking and interpersonal connection really lead to meaning and purpose?
So the way I would say this is think about looking at a pyramid, and look at the bottom of the pyramid. There's data. Go up the pyramid. There's information. There's knowledge, and there's wisdom. And the pyramid gets narrower and narrower. You all live in a time. We were talking again about resume preparation, LinkedIn preparation, the way people connect now is something that was so foreign to us. I mean, I can easily remember when there were no cell phones, or, TV was not the center of your home and all that kind of stuff. So, but you're bombarded by data. And then you go right one step and there's so much information out there. And if you have some temperament and approach to wanting to at least read some things for knowledge and learning, but there's very little wisdom. And that's really what I'm going to call synthetic thinking is, or synthesis is, or critical thinking, is really seeking the paths of wisdom. And some of that is found, this is my moment to witness of faith. Some of that is found in the Bible, for example. That there's a good book. It's called the Bible. And there are things in there that are very wise and very prudent. But there are also some very wise and prudent people who have reflected on their experiences over the years. I mentioned one of them in business, Peter Drucker. If you've not read everything the man writes, at least read one thing called Managing Yourself by Peter Drucker. That will sort this all out for you. Just an essay he wrote called On Managing Yourself. But what we're lacking right now is those moments of wisdom, of real true insight. And that's what critical thinking will do. I'll give you an example. Faith and reason actually go together. They make sense, right? Because faith and reason are really reality. And what we spend a lot of time in our culture pushing off of is reality, right? If you just look at movies, for example, every movie is superheroes. Well, I mean, really? People have those powers? I know nobody that has those powers. Or everything is animation. It's all silly animation for little kids. If you want to see a real movie, go see The Green Book, right? Just see a movie. See a real movie that tells a real story that changes everybody's perspective. It's a real story about real people at a real time, at a real path and crossroads. It is a fantastic movie. I wish they made more movies like that. If you're going to waste your time on superstar movies, forget it. Watch real movies. Watch movies that portray life as gritty, as something that has to be lived in the here and the now.
Challenge yourself. Put yourself in situations that are perhaps a little uncomfortable to learn more about who you are. That's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So along those lines, you have an eclectic and very impressive background in the arts, in counseling, in business. How have all of those things come together? You probably know that we have a deep appreciation of the arts at William Jewell, 55 years of the Harriman Jewell series, and
Yep.
you're a classical music lover. How have those things informed you as a leader?
Well, great music, great art, great acting, like in the Green Book, those sorts of things, or just live stage plays, are about beauty, real beauty. And what the challenge has been as we've proceeded through the 20th century and into the 21st century is that much of the art, music, drama doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Headless statues don't make sense to me. You know, people have heads, they have eyes, they have brains, they have being, right? The music is disorganized now, some of it. Much of it's very disorganized to listen to. Even some of the classical music that they push on you. So what music especially did for me was an introduction to beauty, but an introduction to logic, right? It makes sense. If you learn to listen, and by the way, there was an article not too long ago in the Wall Street Journal. You do not need a degree or even to really study music to actually appreciate great music. You just begin to listen to it. Your brain will pick up the form. It'll pick up the structure. The great composers wrote music that's timeless. The great art, if you get a chance to see some of the great art. By the way, you can just go to the Nelson Atkins Museum or other places and see great art. It makes sense when you see it, when you take it in. And it's to be appreciated, but it's also to be learned from. You know, there's no question that music, reading, things like that, they grow your brain. They grow you, in a sense. So I'm not saying you need to go out and listen to the Brahms quintet for piano and string quartet right away. But take in some Mozart. Mozart wrote music like you and I had dinner tonight. He just wrote. You just ate. He couldn't even remember what he wrote a few days later. So,
Perfect moment to advertise that students can go to the Harriman Jewell series performances for free. Right?
Ooh.
Let's remember this. That's right. Last question, because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for our audience to ask questions. But this is an important one, and I know it's important to you. How has your faith shaped you as a business leader and as a civic leader?
So, I think when people throw out the word faith, they go, uh-oh. Who knows Jim Gaffigan, comedian? You ever see him go, he's not going to talk about Jesus, is he? You know, he gets up there and does this shtick, you know, and he calls his wife a Shiite Catholic. I think that's pretty funny. She's quite serious. But listen, faith informs everything. It's part of our identity. It is part of our wiring. And here's what it's about, really. It's about relationship. Now, we can personalize it to a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, right? That's extremely important. That's part of faith, okay? And that's something that's an ongoing work in everybody's life. Believe you me, no matter where you're at. The key is Christ just sort of sits and waits for us sometimes. He just sits and waits, and it's beautiful. But the thing about it is, we're relational. We're created for relationships. In fact, there's one writer who says that relationships are more important to us than actually eating, right? And what are we having a crisis of in our country? We're having a crisis of isolation. We're having a crisis of suicide for young people, right? Just a family we know recently, their 24-year-old son took his own life. The devastation for that family, their heart is so sad, but this idea of being isolated. And yet, here's the contradiction. We're more connected than we've ever been, right? We can find out about everybody's data and what you're looking at. And, you know, it's just amazing to me how they can track you. And yet, we're isolated from one another because we're struggling with relational components. In other words, some of those things I touched upon earlier, for example, what are you thinking right now? What are you feeling? What's going on for you? What's troubling you? Not to turn this into a counseling session, but real life. How I hope we still interact in our families. It's really in the family that you learn about how to resolve conflict. How many here would would call themselves conflict avoidant. I'll raise my hand first. Yeah, conflict sucks. I don't like it, right? If you want to read a good book, read a book called Fierce Conversations, and it will teach you, which is a book I took in, how to have hard conversations with people. Once you understand that it's not about personally attacking people, then you can have those difficult conversations with people, setting aside the personal. But we're relational. So faith is relational. By its extension, by the reality of faith, is loving your neighbor. Chris said it so well. My gosh, you said it well. What he remembers about William Jewell was being loved. Wow. I was just taken by that. Congratulations. That was awesome. It was awesome. So, but that's what it is. That's what relationships are. That you actually care about people. That you're not just, it's not some sort of superficial thing. Walk down a street in New York, no one looks at anybody. It's kind of creepy, actually, to go to places like that. My oldest son and I just got back from Japan. That's not how it is there. Everybody looks at you. Everybody's there to help you. Obviously, they knew we were rugby fans. My son played rugby in high school. I'm just learned vicariously. But, I love the spectacle. But going to Japan and interacting with all the people, they even had people that had T-shirts on that said, "I speak English." Awesome service. But they would look you in the eye and they would bend over backwards to do everything they could. It was about that relationship. We care about your experience. We want you to have the best experience, whether it's eating or getting to the games, which is, it takes a while to get to these games. Even though they got great mass transit, it's still a major undertaking. But so faith for me is about relationships. And faith at the end of the day is not what you are, but who you are. And you've heard that phrase, but what's hanging on your wall means nothing. It's who you are behind that wall, outside of those walls, that really matters. And so I can give you the Protestant approach is, you may be the only Bible somebody reads today, or the St. Francis of Assisi approach. Speak the gospel and use words only if necessary. Actions speak louder than words. So if you have that desire to have that relationship with God, He's there waiting. And that's how we run. I think that's how we look at our businesses, that people come first, the other. The movement in our life is from I as the center of the universe to others as the center of the universe. And I think when I started this, that message was something my dad gave to us by example with the forming of the league was, I could survive because I've got the money and I can just defect from these, my friends, my other 7 owners, or other 6 owners in this case. Or we can say, no, I'm going to think of the others first. We're going to stand together and form this league and go play. And I think that's a movement from not being I-centered but other-centered. And I would say that would be a great way to summarize the lesson that my dad gave us as a family.
I love that we've come full circle to the influence of your father in your life. And I would also just add that here we have one of the most influential business leaders in the nation. And what I hear you talking about the most is relationships, people, and really understanding who you are as you enter into your professional life. And I really can't think of anything that would be more wise and more meaningful to share with our students at this time. So please join me in thanking Lamar Hunt Jr. for answering these many probing questions. But you're not off the hook yet because we've got more questions.
And I just want to say I appreciate, I want to thank Shelley personally. She is a attention to detail like no other. In fact, you made me go out and actually get a decent picture of myself. And I thank you for that. And that really, Rita, my wife, who you know very well, she helped on that too.
You make it seem effortless. Shelley. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we do have a few moments for some questions from the audience, and some of you have been tweeting, so thank you for that.
You have been betrayed by the...
Yes, technology here. Okay, what's one thing you wish to accomplish in the next 5 years? You've already accomplished so much, as we've heard this evening.
So one of the things I would say that's become very important to us, my wife and I, is our grandchildren, and really our children. I mean, yes, I had the blessing to be able to say, look, I'm going to take 1 week or 8 days or whatever it was to go to Japan. And by the way, if you ever go to Japan and you come home, you still have jet lag a week later. It takes about, I read the day, it takes about 2 weeks. I'm like, ay, ay, ay. But to try to be very intentional about doing things with our grown children and with our grandchildren. I would say one of the things that my dad, it got away from him a little bit, was he kind of kept busy, he kept doing. So I would really like to be very intentional, and we have been very intentional about really doing things with family, because by the time my dad kind of was of that mind, he got cancer, and really his last 3 years it was just battling that cancer, and it was very hard for him to connect with his own grandkids. So in some ways that's who I want to be. Some of the what is there mostly by the sweat of other people, but the who is, I want to really connect with our kids and reconnect now that they're adults, and you enjoy them in a different way. So that may not mean a darn thing to 22-year-olds sitting in the room right now.
No, that's back to relational.
Yes.
Yes. What was the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome to get to where you are?
Well, because I think it's a common thing, I'll bring it up. My parents were actually divorced, and I have been through a divorce. And so those are very, very painful life experiences. And the aftermath is something you have to learn to live with and deal with. And I think, honestly, as painful as those are, and to be able to get to a point where to see other people sympathetically, compassionately, see my mom and dad that way, especially when I became a parent, and to go through that personal experience of going through a divorce, I think it made me a better person. I think it did. It just flat did.
What's your most memorable Mavericks moment? Lots of talk about the Chiefs, but what about your Mavericks moment?
Oh my gosh. Well, hockey has 72 games a year, so there are a lot of games. There really are. What I would say was, I think it's the 2015-16 season when we won the cup called the Brabham Cup for the best record in the ECHL. That team, we had a coach named Richard Matvichuk. We had a great relationship with the New York Islanders, and our team was loaded. And I would just say that was a great moment, and we won a playoff series, something we haven't done since. So winning the playoff series was maybe the best moment.
Excellent. You answered the last one already, so I'm going to, in the interest of time and snow, take about 3 questions from the floor. So, Connor.
What do you consider your greatest accomplishment?
2009 and 10 and 11, my wife went through breast cancer, and I hope she would say this. I felt like I stepped up and was the husband that she needed me to be. But on the tail of that, my brother Clark came to me as she was finishing her treatments, and he was sensitive to this, and that she was cancer-free. He said, we need somebody to go be in Columbus, Ohio. We have this soccer team that we still own called the Columbus Crew. They play in the same league as Sporting KC. And my dad had owned 3 teams at one time. He'd owned the Wizards here, which are now Sporting KC. He got those sold before he passed. After he passed in 2008, he passed in 06. In 08, we thought we had the team sold, and unfortunately the economy hit. the buyer had to back out. The stock he had pledged was not worth. So we're still having two soccer teams, FC Dallas and the Columbus Crew. So it was really more in 2010 now that I sit here and think about it. Clark came to me and he said, we need somebody to be on the ground in Columbus. And I said, sort of like an owner liaison in the community, because we're really suffering in the community without presence. So my wife and I, we got an apartment there, and we went and stayed there as much as we could, especially when the season was on. And in the summer of 2013, we'd done a lot of things. I mean, being present, being around the general manager, who was extremely talented, a guy by the name of Mark McCullers, really helped him in the community. We could go. I was in the room. I didn't do anything. I was in the room when the Barbasol deal was struck for the sponsorship for the jerseys, which was a huge deal. Subsequently became great friends with the owner of Barbasol, Tom Murray, but I didn't literally do anything. It was Chris Previtt was the guy, I think. I don't know if you've ever met him. Chris. But anyway, he works for Top Golf now. But anyway, he made the deal. So anyway, we're there, but we're trying to get the team so that the revenue is solid, the sponsorships are solid, so that we can get this thing on the market and get it sold. We're not unclear about that. So I was also that liaison. So at times I was meeting with people. We had a lot of tire kickers, a lot of people that came through Columbus. And in the summer of 2013, what we were going to do was we were actually going to just go live there the whole summer. Rita and I were going to live there the whole summer and just be in the community and just embed ourselves, because we were making great progress in the sponsorship bucket, the ticket sales. I mean, there was a big concert. They had a Rock on the Range. And lo and behold, in June of 2013, a guy comes along. We met with him. We went to dinner with him. It's not worth telling his name because he's now sold the team. But we met with him, and lo and behold, I remember, I'll never forget the date, June 7th, 2013, he offered to just buy the whole thing for above what we wanted. And for me, I think what it was 2.5 to 3 years of a lot of sweat, of on the ground, living in a city I didn't know that well. I got to know it. I sort of missed it. It went away so quickly. I had a daughter and a son do big internships through the Columbus Crew, which has helped them. You know, that was part of my deal. Hey, they're coming of age, let them do internships all summer and things like that. So to me, if I look at that as a business accomplishment, that's what I would put up there, was just facilitating, being a part of the sale of that team, because it helped our family. And our family company is called Unity Hunt. Underneath all of this umbrella that they mentioned, everything is unity, and it was my dad's idea that we would all work together as a family, rowing in the same direction. So that would be what I would say for myself personally.
I can't see in the back. Okay, good. Oh, thank you.
There's a quote from the TV show that I used to watch, which is, "In this world, all we have are the connections that we make." How do you feel your career would have been different if you didn't establish the connections that those careers?
Well, you know, obviously, the being the namesake of my father has been very, very helpful. It's opened a lot of doors. It really has. I mean, you know, I can get meetings with people that maybe you can't normally get. How it's really helped, I think, is in the area of what I'll call philanthropy and stewardship, of getting people together to join in something and go forward with perhaps a nonprofit work and things like that. That's the great blessing that I can see. And that's the gift I've been given. I had to learn that. I really had to learn that. I was more like a musician type person, a little bit more, I wouldn't say a loner, but you know, musicians have that time where you're in your own creative world and then you share it with the world. What I had to learn is that connecting with people and that understanding that we all have gifts and we all know people, we all know more than we do. And also now, as I've gotten a little older, the ability to facilitate for people, you know, getting a stream of people's resumes and things like that and seeing if I can't help them make that connection or introducing them to an internship opportunity or things like that. With the caveat that I can't make promises, I can't tell people who to hire. So I think I've learned that it's a gift. And it kind of fell in my lap, and sometimes things fall in your lap and you got to say, I got to deal with this. The first time you hold your first child, it's like, wait a minute, I got to deal with this. Actually she was real fragile. So thank you.
Okay, so one
I hope
over
I
here.
answered it.
Ready from the end?
There's a
All right,
gen-
one more. Yes. Okay.
So you talked about the interview question of tell a time about your failure of yours. Can you tell us one of yours?
Sure. I can. And I didn't anticipate that, but so there was a period of time when I got interested. I was asked, I think it was Kit, we were talking about, she's doing some investing, or actually you're doing advising, and I didn't really get to talk about it. I've done some angel investing, meaning taking a sum of money and investing in startup companies. Let me just say I'm batting and one in particular was a company that it was a counseling service where you would the app would be on the phone, and let's say you were a patient of somebody, you could connect with your provider and they could talk to you for 15 minutes, FaceTime or whatever. And while it didn't sound like a bad idea, I thought it was a great idea. The world has been swarmed by that technology now, and this company got swallowed and crushed in it. And it does make you feel like a failure, because you don't, in a sense, you don't waste the money, because it is going to pay people for a period of time to do the work that but you want it to succeed. And so when I think about angel investing, I think about, that's not my cup of tea. I'm not a good judge of that. It's just not my deal.
All right. Help me thank Lamar Hunt Jr. for being with us this evening.
Thank you all. Thank you all.